students of Ghana Christian International High School, and we urge you all to subscribe to his Gov TV. Thank you.
Hello there. You are welcome to his Gov TV. Today, before we even begin with what we have for you today, I would like to remind you to subscribe to the channel if you have not done so. And if you have subscribed to, we thank you very much for your support. The newcomers, this is the only platform where you get access to history, government, as well as CRS video lessons. All the lessons uploaded on this platform are based on the WASI syllabus, and so it is good for students who are preparing for WASI. It is also good for teachers who are taking students through their WASI preparation, and more so, it is good for everybody who is generally interested in the history of Africa and the world at large. We don't only concern ourselves with history lessons. We also go beyond to look at historical trending news, like trending news. We try to look at the historical backgrounds to some of these issues. More so, I'm working towards adding more subjects to it, and pretty soon we may add social studies and some sciences to the channel. So our science students, you can also subscribe as you wait for the addition of science courses, biology, physics, chemistry, and whatnot to the channel. And so basically that is what this whole channel is about. And so today I want us to look at the first townsmen in Ghana. The first townsmen in Ghana, and this particular topic is one of the earliest topics in Form 2, SHS Form 2, and that is year 11 in the international schools. So today we are looking at the origin and growth of towns in Ghana. So the various towns that emerge in Ghana. We are going to look at the origin and growth of some of them. We will only take a look at some 4 or so early towns that emerged before pre-colonial era. And so we will only concern ourselves with these 4 towns, and that is what the WASI syllabus require of students who are preparing for their WASI, being it WASI or NOVTEC. All right, and so we concern ourselves with only 4. And so today we will look at the origin and growth of these 4 towns in Ghana. Basically, that is what we'll be looking at today. So let's go in there and look at these 4 towns, and let's take a look at our lesson objectives for today. So the lesson objectives for today will be that by the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe the origin, and growth of early towns in Ghana. And these 4 early towns I talked about were Bego, Kumasi, Edina, and then Leh and Se. All right, so these 4 towns are what we are going to discuss. These towns are termed as pre-colonial towns because they were towns that was there before the coming of the Europeans. There are some towns that emerge as a result of the European presence in a particular area. However, these towns we are going to look at were there before the Europeans arrived, which then presupposes that the Europeans came to meet these towns already in existence, doing their own thing. And so we will look at Bego. I don't know if you have been there before or you have heard of a name of a town called Bego. And then we also look at Kumasi, and Kumasi is a very popular town, and I know you are familiar with this town. And then we have Edina, and then Edina, you may be familiar with Edina, but probably because of the traditional name, this is the traditional name, we will look at the anglicized name or the European name given to this town, and then probably you remember this town. It's also a famous town. Then we will look at the town of Leh and Se, which I know probably is still not around, but we will look at where it is found, and we just learn something small about these towns. So let's begin with the history behind some of these towns. But before that, let's try and introduce ourselves to the topic that we are treating. So there is evidence in Ghana to show that prior to the establishment of contact with foreign people, local societies had already established a very complex urban settlements by dint of local factors, all right? So because of certain local factors which had occurred, and we will look at these factors later on in our discussions, okay? So because of some local factors that had occurred before the coming of the Europeans, certain towns emerge or urban centers emerge, and these towns were not merely villages or small towns. They were urban settlements, all right. In our own way, they were urban settlements. Okay. Now these towns had sophisticated. These sophisticated societies had distinctive cultural values, distinctive cultural values. So all the towns that had emerged at this time had a distinctive cultural values. They were different from each other. Their social organization was so organized in such a way that they had their own thing, they had their own thing doing. And so that is the distinctive cultural values that we are talking about here. Good. So this is an example of a town. When you look over here, you find an aerial view of a modern town of Bego. And it's now known as, the other name is also Hani. And I'll show you, of course, this town properly when we begin with the lesson proper. So let's begin with the various towns, the history behind these various towns. All right, good. So let's begin with the first of these towns, is the origin of the Bego town. All right, the origin of the Bego town. But before we even begin with the origin of the Bego town, I would like to say that most of the information that we are going to get from these towns are based on archaeological sources, as well as oral tradition. And you would understand that during the existence of some of these towns, the art of writing was not known to the local people who were in these towns, and therefore they were not able to record their history in books for us to come, for the next generation to come and learn. And so most of their towns, most of the information regarding their history was gotten from archaeology as well as oral tradition. And we all know the disadvantages of these two sources for writing African history or for reconstructing African history. Most of the informations are very scanty. There isn't much information on these towns, so don't expect much. It's just mere surfaces, all right? Yes, so you shouldn't expect much of these towns. So let's begin with the Bego town. So we're saying that the Bego town was one of the first major towns that existed in Ghana before even the arrival of Europeans. So as I earlier indicated, these towns were there even before the arrival of the Europeans, which then presupposes that Europe or Europeans came to meet these towns. Now, according to archaeological evidence, Bego rose up in present-day Brong region by AD 110, and then it reached its height between AD 1450 and 1650. So those who are familiar with Brong region, those who know Brong region, that was the area where Bego was located. Now look at the map in the middle here. This is the Bego town we are talking about, okay? Bego town, and this area is found in modern Brong region. I think now they have even redemarcated the region, so I don't know whether it's in the Ahafo or it's in the Bono region. But then bear in mind that it can be found around the former Brong Ahafo region area there. So that's the Bego town or Bego town that I have inscribed over here. So this is the town that we are talking about, found in the interior of modern day Ghana. Good, let's move on. So it rose and grew because of its strategic location, which was just to the north of the forest, just to the north, okay, of the forest. So just to the north of the forest. Now we are aware that when you look at the map of Ghana, the whole from this region, if I cut here off, all right, if I cut here, of all the region here, the northern part of Ghana, they are all savanna, you understand? That's the savanna area. So this area is the savanna area. Now, this area is the forest belt, okay? So when I cut here, let's cut here. So this area where we have Asante and Co, this area will be the forest belt of Ghana. And this area here is the coastal zone of Ghana. So, and we are saying that the town Bego is located just to the north of the forest. So you can see that the Bego town is sitting just, between the savanna as well as the forest areas. You get a point. And that is the strategic location that we are talking about. It is just found just at the end of the forest and just at the beginning of the savanna area. Now, why is that location so strategic? Strategic because now there was abundance of gold in the forest area here, Asante and Co, right? Then there was also abundance of kola in the savanna area here, and that's the northern part. And therefore, Bego could tap into these two resources. They could have access to gold. They could also have access to what? To kola. And these two commodities were very, very, very important during the pre-colonial times. Gold and kola were very, very, very important. They were essential commodities. So if a town had access to these commodities, it means that that town was going to grow and, have a lot of money. And so that is why Bego, or Bego grew, because it was located in that area. Good. Now, let's take a look at the economic life of the people who lived in Bego. Now, the people of Bego depended on agriculture as one main basis, with crop farming and also animal rearing. So the people who lived in Bego were into agriculture and they were into crop farming as well as animal rearing. So since there wasn't any sea around that area, they were not involved in fishing, but rather crop farming and animal rearing. All right, good. Now let's take a look at another evidence that archaeologists were able to discover. By the way, this is the modern town of Bego. All right, so yeah, that's it. By the way, this is the modern town of Bego. So let's move on. Now, archaeological evidence or evidence from archaeology also points that there was a well-developed craft and industrial base. So the people were into craft and industry as well. How did we come by this information? Because archaeologists excavated and came up or found certain items that suggest that the people who lived in Bego were actually involved in craft and industry. Now look at the map, the image over here. These images over here, or these pots, these broken pots you see here, were actually excavated and found in the site of Bego, which then suggests that the people who lived in Bego were into the production of these craft and poetry. All right, so some of these crafts that we are talking about were iron working, pottery, gold working, and then ivory carving. All right, so the existence of these, or archaeologists' discovery of these items in Bego, also suggests that the people were not only engaged in agriculture, but also they were engaged in the production of these crafts. All right. Now let's take a look at the next one. Trade also formed a very important economic activity of the people of Bego. So they did not only engage in agriculture and craft, but then they also traded with the people around them, with their neighbors. So these trade were in two forms. There was the local trade, and then also the long distance trade. Now the local trade had to do with trading internally, between themselves internally, all right? And then the long distance trade had to do with trading outside their region with different people in different areas. Okay, good. Now There is also an evidence, archaeological evidence, which also points to links with the trans-Saharan trade as well as the Atlantic trade system. So archaeologists also have been able to discover certain evidence that also pre-suggests that the people who lived in Bego were actually involved in the transatlantic slave trade. Actually, they were located. This area is a trade route in the transatlantic trans-Saharan trade. The Bego area here is a trade route in the trans-Saharan trade. Good. So I think this will be the history for Bego. If you have any question or any suggestion or any contribution, you can kindly add it in the comment section. We are all seeking, we are all learning together. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. Let me add the next one. I don't want to overburden you, so we will do 2 towns today, and then in our next video we will do the other 2 towns. All right? Yes, because I don't want to overburden and make the recording long. Now let's take a look at the origin of the Lay and Say. Now, origin, so the town Lay and Say. Let's look at it. Around 1300 AD, the town of Lay and Say rose in the Shire Hills in the site of Dorwinya. So the Lay and Say town that we are talking about was found around the Shire Hills area where we have Dorwinya. So the site of Dorwinya. So those who are in the Greater Accra region, we are talking about the Dorwinya site area. That is where this town was located, and it measured 1.6 kilometers per second by 1.1 kilometers, while Say grew from 9 kilometers by 2 by AD 1650, and that's the size of the area. Now let's look at the economic activities of the people. And like I said, these towns were pre-colonial towns, and so there isn't much information about them. So please, let's do with the little information that we have about these towns. Now the main basis of the growth of the town was the very profitable poultry industry. So the people were also engaged in poultry industry, and they were able to do that because of the availability of the kaolin clay. Now the kaolin clay was what was used for the making of poultry, and so because of the existence of these commodities in this area, the people who lived in Say and Lay were able to make certain poultry, active or industry. Now this enabled the local women to engage in the poultry industry for a living, and most of the people who were involved in this poultry industry, most of them were also women. All right. Yes. Now also archaeological findings shows that in the 17th century the people of the towns also reared cattle, sheep, goats, as well as fowl, and they depended on this activity in part for their prosperity. So like I indicated earlier, archaeological evidence also shows that the people also engaged in these agricultural activities, like the rearing of cattle, sheep, goat, and fowls, and etc. Good. So I think that is the only thing that we have about Lay and Say. And so if you also have any comment or section or any addition or any contribution to this town, you kindly add it in the comment section. Good. Let's move on to the next town. All right. Let's move on to the next town. Or you may, let me just end with these 2 towns. So I'll do the town of Kumasi and Elmina in the next video or in our next lesson. Since we don't have time is not on our side. So kindly be checking on the site for the history of Kumasi as well as Edina in our next video. Good. So thank you very much for your time, and we shall meet some other time. Bye-bye. Please don't go without subscribing.
It's God TV. First among equals. Bye.